A young boy just 8 years old standing nervously on the Grand Ole Opry stage. The spotlight blinds him as he clutches his guitar. The announcer booms, "Ladies and gentlemen, the son of the legendary Hank Williams." The crowd roars, but they're not cheering for him, they're cheering for the ghost of his father. This boy would spend decades fighting to escape that shadow, surviving a 440-foot fall down a mountain that shattered his face, battling addiction, and reinventing country music along the way. This isn't just another story of a famous musician's son. This is how Hank Williams Jr. went from being a tribute act to becoming an American icon who forever changed the sound of country music. On May 26, 1949, in Shreveport, Louisiana, Randall Hank Williams entered the world with the weight of his father's legacy already on his tiny shoulders. His father, Hank Williams Sr., had become a country music legend, penning timeless classics that would define the genre for generations. But the elder Williams wouldn't live to see his son grow up. When Hank Jr. was just 3 years old, his father died at the young age of 29, leaving behind a musical legacy that seemed impossible to equal. Hank's mother, Audrey Williams, saw an opportunity in her young son. She was determined that her boy would continue the Williams legacy, regardless of what it might cost him personally. By age 8, she had him performing his father's songs, complete with the same mannerisms and vocal style. The young Hank hardly knew his father, yet he was forced to become his carbon copy. At 11, he made his debut on the Grand Ole Opry, the same hallowed stage where his father had stood. The crowd went wild, not for the boy's talent, but for the ghost they saw in him. In 1964, when most boys his age were worrying about school dances, 14-year-old Hank Jr. released his debut album, Hank Williams Jr. Sings the Songs of Hank Williams. The title itself revealed the problem: he wasn't allowed to be himself. He was packaged and sold as a living memorial to his father. While the album was commercially successful, something was dying inside the young performer. He wasn't making music, he was performing a seance. Throughout his teen years and into his early 20s, Hank Jr. continued to record and perform in his father's style. The pressure to live up to the Williams name was crushing. Imagine spending every day of your life being compared to someone else, and not just anyone, but a legend whose achievements seemed impossibly out of reach. This was Hank Jr., 'tis reality, day after day, year after year. As he entered adulthood, the weight began to break him. The constant comparisons to his father drove him to alcohol and pills, the same demons that had haunted his father. By the early 1970s, he was spiraling downward. His performances became mechanical, his personal life chaotic. Country music fans expected him to be his father reincarnated, and record executives wanted him to stay in that profitable box. But beneath the cowboy hat and the famous name, Hank Jr. was suffocating. The first sparks of rebellion came when he started collaborating with Southern rock musicians, like Toy Caldwell of the Marshall Tucker Band and Charlie Daniels. These weren't the polished Nashville sound makers his fans expected. They were raw, loud, and unapologetic. Hank began experimenting with a fusion of country rock and blues that horrified traditionalists but excited a younger audience hungry for something authentic. "I was ready to break out," Williams later explained. "I had all this musical knowledge and training, but I was trapped in this box labeled Hank's Boy. I wanted to blow that box to pieces." He began writing songs that reflected his own experiences, rather than trying to channel his father's voice. These early attempts at finding his own sound were promising, but he was still tethered to the expectations of his name. But before he could fully break free, tragedy struck. On August 8, 1975, while climbing Ajax Peak in Montana, the snow beneath Hank gave way. He plummeted over 440 feet down the mountain face. The fall shattered his skull in multiple places. His face was so badly damaged that when rescuers found him, they weren't sure he would survive the trip to the hospital. Doctors didn't expect him to make it through the night, and if he did, they doubted he would ever speak normally again, let alone sing. For 2 years, Hank underwent agonizing surgeries and rehabilitation. Multiple operations were required to reconstruct his face. When he finally emerged from this ordeal, he was physically transformed. He grew a beard and began wearing sunglasses to hide his scars. But the physical changes were just the surface. Something more profound had shifted inside him. The near-death experience had broken something free in Hank. "I had to learn to talk again, to think again," he later explained. "I had to relearn who I was, and when you're starting from scratch like that, you don't have to be who people tell you to be." The man who fell down that mountain was Hank Williams' son. The man who climbed back out was Hank Williams Jr., his own man, with his own voice and his own vision. He returned to music not as the son of Hank Williams, but as his own man with his own sound. In 1975, he released Hank Williams Jr. and Friends, an album that shocked the country music establishment. Gone were the slick Nashville arrangements and the attempts to mimic his father's voice. In their place was a raw, rebellious sound that blended country storytelling with southern rock energy. The critics were confused, but a new generation of fans understood immediately. This wasn't his father's music. This was something new, something real. This transformation coincided perfectly with the rising outlaw country movement, led by artists like Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson, who were also rejecting the commercial Nashville sound in favor of something more authentic. Hank Jr. didn't just join this movement, he became one of its defining voices. His new sound was a perfect bridge between traditional country and southern rock, bringing together audiences who might never have found common ground otherwise. Throughout the late 1970s, Hank continued to develop his distinctive style. Albums like The New South and One Night Stands established him as a force to be reckoned with in his own right. His songwriting became more personal, often addressing his struggles with his father's legacy directly. In Family Tradition, perhaps his most autobiographical song, he confronted critics who questioned his lifestyle and musical choices head-on. The 1980s saw Hank Williams Jr. reach heights his father never lived to see. He released hit after hit, A Country Boy Can Survive, Born to Boogie, and All My Rowdy Friends Are Coming Over Tonight, which would later become the famous Monday Night Football theme song, introducing him to an audience far beyond traditional country music fans. Between 1987 and 1989, he won the Country Music Association's Entertainer of the Year award 3 times in a row, a testament to how completely he had emerged from his father's shadow. The boy who had once been forced to imitate his father was now one of the most influential and innovative voices in country music history. His appeal wasn't limited to country fans either. Rock audiences embraced his energetic performances and rebellious attitude. Hank Jr. became one of the first country artists to use music videos effectively, with his larger-than-life personality, perfectly suited to the MTV era. His concerts were legendary for their energy and unpredictability. While his father had performed mostly with just a guitar and his distinctive voice, Hank Jr.'s shows were full-blown rock spectacles, with full bands and elaborate production. Throughout this career renaissance, Hank's personal life remained as tumultuous as his music was successful. His first marriage to Gwen Jurgen in 1971 gave him his son Hank Williams III, who would later carry on the family musical legacy in his own rebellious way. Like his father, the third Hank would also struggle with the weight of the Williams name, before finding his own unique voice that blended country with punk and metal. Hank Jr. married again in 1977 to Becky White, with whom he had 2 daughters, Hillary and Holly, both of whom would also pursue careers in music. But it was his third marriage to Mary Jane Thomas in 1990 that brought him the most stability, lasting over 3 decades, until her sudden death in 2022. The Williams family musical tradition continued to expand through his children. His daughters Hillary and Holly both became musicians in their own right. His son Hank III developed a cult following with his mix of traditional country, punk, and metal. The Williams legacy had evolved from a burden into a diverse musical dynasty. Tragedy continued to follow him when his daughter Catherine was killed in a car accident in 2020. Through it all, Hank channeled his pain into his music, never shying away from the darkness in his life or in American society. His songs spoke to the struggles of working-class Americans, the pride of Southern identity, and the importance of staying true to yourself no matter the cost. In 2020, decades after he had broken free from his father's shadow and created his own legacy, Hank Williams Jr. was finally inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. The honor was long overdue, but perhaps the delay was fitting. Hank Jr. had never been embraced by the Nashville establishment, and that was exactly what made him special. He hadn't followed the rules, he had rewritten them. What makes Hank Williams Jr.'s story so powerful isn't just his musical success, it's what he represents. In a world that wanted to define him solely by his father's accomplishments, he fought to create his own identity. In an industry that wanted to confine him to a specific sound, he broke boundaries and fused genres. When life literally broke him, he rebuilt himself on his own terms. His influence can be heard in generations of artists who followed. Modern country stars who blend traditional sounds with rock, hip-hop, and pop are all walking a path that Hank Jr. helped clear. His willingness to bring different musical worlds together showed that authenticity matters more than adhering to genre boundaries. In 2023, at 74 years old, Hank found love again with Brandy Williams, proving that even after unimaginable loss and hardship, new chapters are possible. The boy who once stood trembling in his father's shadow has become a towering figure in American music, not by mimicking greatness, but by finding the courage to be uniquely himself. The legacy of Hank Williams Jr. isn't just about hit songs or awards, it's about the courage to break free from expectations and forge your own path. We all face pressure to live up to someone else's standards, to stay within the lines others have drawn for us. But Hank's journey reminds us that our greatest contribution comes not from living someone else's life, but from having the courage to live our own. So the next time you feel the weight of others' expectations crushing your spirit, remember the man who fell 440 feet down a mountain, rebuilt his shattered face, and emerged not as a copy, but as an original. Remember the artist who had the courage to disappoint his fans in order to be true to himself. Remember Hank Williams Jr., who proved that sometimes you have to break before you can truly become whole. In his own words, "I've been knocked down, but I always get back up again." That's not just a country song, that's a blueprint for living an authentic life.